if I'm sad about something, I'm not getting to work on my cars. Like I want to be in the shop, spend too much time in the office.
And what do you mean? Like that's therapeutic for you? Do you mind if I start recording?
Okay.
Sure. I mean, is that your therapy? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, for me to go back and do the simple things that I used to do, like set up my race car, or I don't care if I'm packing bearings or building a shock or just looking at changing something aerodynamically, that is the true thing on earth that still brings me peace. As you evolve, you get so many other things pulling at you, and you just feel like, the old, what was the old Rocky Balboa comment, you got too civilized, or you just want to go back and do that. So yeah, when I'm back there working on the cars, or if we can go spend a track day at the racetrack, that's heaven for me.
Right on. Speaking of that, this is one of my questions deeper in my list, but what was writing the book, was it emotionally draining or was it therapeutic?
I think a little bit of both, but it's something I've thought about for a while for a lot of different reasons. And, the main reason is I really do feel like I've evolved as a person and I've learned a lot. And through the journey, 50 years, I'll be racing 50 years this year. And there's people that people you've met, people that you've changed, that changed you. And I want them all to understand what I was thinking back then, where it evolved now, and how that time spent with them made a difference in my life, even though I didn't realize it then. All of those people you pass, all of the experiences you have create the DNA, really, of the person that you become. You just don't realize it while it's happening. And then, you back and you reflect and you think, wow, that this person said something to me, or this person pointed me in a direction, bad or good, right? Because people set good examples and bad examples. And I wanted all the people to know that helped me in a positive way, that they've been part of a journey with me, that they can feel like they've been part of that journey and be recognized a little bit. And I also wanted, my family and my children to understand who I really am. People, I don't know that, some people don't ever get a chance to sit with their kids and because I didn't really get to know who exactly, I knew what my mom and dad were, but to really get to know them, and so I want my kids to know why I did what I did, or what I was thinking when I did it, right or wrong. And I do feel, again, from another side of things, I've been really fortunate to have had experiences with some of the greatest race car drivers and greatest race mechanics and characters in the sport. So wanted to tell those stories as well, and have that responsibility of carrying forth a little bit of sports history. So there were a lot of reasons, but once you start to write the book, then you realize, first you're worried, is my story any good? Is anybody going to care? And then second of it is like, you're like, hey, we're like 10,000 words past what it's supposed to be, right? All of a sudden you got a multi-volume War and Peace, and it can't do that. So it's hard, and it does bring up when you're trying to tell that story, when you're really trying to tell that story in the best way that you can in the shortest amount of words, it makes you think pretty hard about what you really, what's important to say. So I'm going to say that to answer your question, it was really all of those things. It was a little bit emotionally draining. It was very therapeutic, but in a way, I'm very proud of the book. The feedback I get is that when you read the book, you hear me telling the story, and that's what I wanted, right? And I wanted, again, people to understand, right or wrong, this is either what I was going through, or this is what I was thinking, but I'm not that person. I'm not the person I was yesterday, let alone 30 years ago. And we're all going to change. So, I tell everybody if hopefully they learn something from the book and are entertained by it.
Good, right on. Yeah, hindsight is a great teacher, I guess.
Yeah. If but how many people do you know that don't, like, they just keep making the same mistake because they just don't, it never sets in. We have this thing, when your ego overrides your intelligence, it's not a good combination. And, how many people you've been around like that where their ego just stops them from learning the lesson?
So to jump into one of your previous relationships, I was reminded of, it's a little bit of an awkward analogy, but Gordon Ramsay is the chef. So he talks in an interview of his, he's known for just being a flat out jerk, kind of an asshole. And he talks about his mentors being even worse than he was. And if I asked you this question in the 90s, you might have a different answer than you would today. But working with Alan Quickie, did you leave that relationship with a reactive of like, here's what I know that I never want to do? Or did you leave with some influence from him?
Yeah, I think, again, both. But the lesson that you think you learned in that instant, right, when there's the emotion and that immaturity, and then as it evolves, you realize it's something different, right? And when I left after that argument with Alan, I knew I had value, right? But Alan made me feel like I had no value. And I was angry at him for that. But then I realized that he didn't know how to, it wasn't like that was the way, he was at his limit as far as he hadn't evolved to understand management and people, right? So it still comes down to, if we could really pick out, if we knew what box everybody was in and understood their personalities and knew them a little bit better, it'd be easier. But that's not the reality of life, right? I have a preconceived notion of what he's thinking, and he's got a preconceived notion of what I'm thinking, and neither one of us are right. And I think that's why there's certain companies and people that are really successful, a guy like Rick Hendrick, because one of the things he makes everybody do is kind of take a personality test, and he tries to fill in those blocks. But with Alan, when I look back at my relationship with Alan today, I still realize it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work, okay? But I understand why, and I'm not as emotional about it. Maybe he would have evolved. Heck, us in our 60s versus in our 30s, completely different people. But I don't have that anger anymore, or that sense of I wasn't good enough to work for him, or he just, we just did not know how to communicate with one another.
So playing off of that, and I'm sorry, remind me, who gave you the first shot? You didn't want to be a crew chief, but you were asked to be.
Yeah.
Who was it that gave you that?
It was Rick Hendrick. I was not Alan's crew chief. So when I went over after quit, got fired, however, it just depends on who you want to talk to. Alan and I were dancing around, swinging each other by the collar, and he was yelling, "You're fired." I was yelling, "I quit." So it was, kind of a split. The people from Ford put me over with Bill Davis Racing to work with Jeff Gordon, and I wasn't even the crew chief there. I like to build cars, chassis. I didn't want to be on the radio. Had no experience, race strategy or anything like that. So, learning it, watching, being at the races and whatnot. But then when we went to Hendrick Motorsports, Jeff wanted me to be the crew chief. And, I wanted to be kind of like I was at IROC. I was kind of the team manager and, car builder, setup guy, all that. And, I never thought about race strategy and being on the radio and whatnot. So Mr. Hendrick that day said, Jeff wants you to be the crew chief. And I said, I have no experience being a crew chief, but, can't be a crew chief. He said, well, you'll be fine. We've got these guys here are going to help you and got a lot of experience here at Hendrick. I said, no, you need to hire a crew chief, and I'll be I'll just be the team manager.
So was it their confidence in you? Like you're talking about the personality clash that you had with Alan. Was it their confidence in you doing the job that inspired you or motivated you to do a damn good job at it?
100%, because Rick Hendrick sees more, and we talk about this in the book, but he saw more in me than I saw in myself, and so did Jeff Gordon and John Bickford, and they knew I could do it. I was gun shy because I had failed at Allen's. Like, I had failed. It's like you get a shot to go to the majors, and 3 weeks you're back sitting on the bench in the minors. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa. So I'd failed. I didn't have the confidence that I could do it. And when Rick Hendrick put me in charge of that team with that responsibility and just said, look, you can do this. We're going to support you. Actually, he kidded around with me. He said, look, that's the only job I got. Take it or leave it. But that inspired me then to really get out and figure out, okay, how do I be a good crew chief? And the first thing I realized, to be a good crew chief, I had to understand people better. And that's when I really got into the team leadership, and I read the Pat Rileys and honestly read a lot about philosophy and leadership and organization and Vince Lombardi stuff and all of those things, and worked really hard at it. And I watched tape after tape after tape after tape of Cup race, trying to understand decisions and tires and fuel and pit stops and all those things. So had to, besides getting the team ready, I worked, hard, in the old online crew chief training school.
So looking back at your career, the high points of the career from someone of my perspective, I don't know you personally, just knowing from what you read or what you see, and I know the title of your book comes from, I believe you said that everybody is kind of familiar with the trophies that you received, but not everybody's familiar with the scars that you've gotten along the way. So coming into it, you wanted to be a race car driver. So did you, at that point...
I was a race car driver. I just wasn't a very good one.
But did you just want to be, like when you entered Penske, for instance, like did you want to be a race car driver, or did you just want to be successful?
I went to work for Roger Penske, hoping to get a drive in his IndyCar. When I kid myself about not being a good one. I was okay. I did okay for no more equipment and money and support that I had. When I talk to people now, they say you're pretty hard on yourself. You've done a lot, because I did test the IROC cars, and we just never had the consistency or the money. But I wanted to go IndyCar racing, and that's why I went to work for IROC. And when I went to work for IROC, I learned a lot more than just driving the cars. When you're in the Penske organization, you learn a lot. That is as good as any. If there was a Harvard of automobile racing, Roger's culture that he's built there is something that really runs deep, because that changes you. You either fit into it or you don't. But if you accept that, that's something that can help you no matter what you do for the rest of your life. And I was very lucky to meet and work directly under a man named Jay Signori there through the IROC series. And again, Jay Signori was Mark Donohue's best friend and Mark Donohue's mechanic. And so all of these guys, all this stuff, this nucleus of Penske racing, like the whole, the unfair advantage and all that, like the guys that lived that, I was able to have access to those guys and be around them, and that's again that mental attitude, or that culture that Roger created. It's not so much the, hey, we're going to teach you how to weld, or put this spring in. It's the thought process of how to win races and how to prepare. That's what you learn at Penske. And when you take that from what I learned there, and I tell people this all the time, I got to work for Roger Penske, I got to work for Rick Hendrick. If I hadn't have been able to be successful with both those guys as mentors, I wouldn't have been very credible right now.
Yeah. That was another question I was going to ask. Were you kind of like a sponge at IROC? And my assumption would have been just having the big names coming through and working with them hand in hand. But what you're saying, it was more about the day-to-day of working underneath Penske in that organization than it was seeing the big name guys kind of come through.
I think it's a combination of those things, again, because the education that I've got from being in the Penske culture got me the respect from those big name drivers, who then take you to another level, right? So now you learn about the car from the best in the business, right? You learn about, but then you find that championship race drivers, guys like Andretti and Foyts and Unsers and Earnhardts and Petties, and and then you get guys come over, Derek Bell and Jackie Ickx and Fittipaldi. This whole the truly international race of champions. These guys are at a different level. It's not like when you talk to them, they're bringing you up because they're seeing and discussing things and pointing out stuff in the car and talking about the racetracks and tires and things in a much different level than regular people. It'd be like if if you played college ball and this and that, and all of a sudden you're playing basketball with Michael Jordan every day. Different. It's they see things different. They do things different, and being exposed to that for so many years in a row at IROC just brought that level up, and you don't even realize it. You don't even realize that you're beginning to play at a different level, and all of that again, evolution just prepared me for the next step. In the book I say, I'm like the damn Forrest Gump of motorsports. You just don't know. That evolution's coming, and all of a sudden an opportunity comes up, and boom, you're prepared for it, and you hit a home run. You're like, how did I do that? And it's because of all the things that you were just exposed to.
What other characteristics were there or similarities between, because you've befriended, you've had experience with so many talented drivers of different disciplines. You kind of touch on that on what you were just saying, but are there common characteristics amongst the really talented guys?
100%. And Roger Penske will say this over and over again, those guys look out of a much bigger windshield than an average person. They see a lot more about what's happening during the race, while the race is happening, the other drivers, they see more, and they all have an ability to, 1 second to you and I is much different than it is to them. Whether that's a matter of slowing time down or, as Roger says, just seeing more, but be able, what they break down and the way they think about what's happening is just different. And they all had that in common, as well as guys like Mario Andretti, Dale Earnhardt, specifically, Unsers. They will fight you for fractions, thousands. Like the no gain is too small for them, where somebody may overlook a whatever or not whatever. Not those guys. Every single thing they can do to get an advantage, that's all they were thinking about. There was not anything on their mind but how they were going to win. What was the path to beating everybody else? And that was it.
You touched on this with your interview with Dale Earnhardt Jr., but like entering, or maybe it was within the book, entering the 92 season with Gordon, 92, 93, you kind of said you didn't know what you didn't know, that you guys entered kind of green, and that you'd read a bunch of leadership books and you'd kind of immersed yourself in educating yourself on being a good leader and being a good crew chief. But what were some of the things that you literally did to, because from afar, like even Junior talked to you in the podcast and talked a lot about your leadership roles. And again, I don't know you personally, but from afar, looking back at your life, you are a confident leader who makes good decisions every day. Like, what did you do physically or literally to kind of, I think you said you kind of faked some of the confidence or some of the assurance that you had at that time? Is that accurate to say?
Absolutely. There's no doubt. We ran one race at the end of 92, and which was really good because we absolutely at that time realized then we had a lot to learn to get ready for 93. But I tried to look a lot at what other people weren't doing, and there was a lack of, I think, communication and, based on what I'd seen with other sports teams, it just seemed like the other sports teams, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, whatever it was, they had more meetings, and they had game films, and they got the team together, and the team was involved, and they, there was motivation. And where NASCAR really wasn't about that, yet. So I tried to communicate a lot with guys. I tried to say things on the radio that were motivational and do whatever. And what Junior was talking about is I was scared to death to talk on the radio. I used to have to practice it. My finger used to shake on the button because I'd be afraid I'm going to screw up or talk at the wrong time. It just wasn't something that I was used to. I actually had a fear. I didn't like to talk in front of people. So I went to off-site. I just looked up some speaking classes, and I went to a couple of speaking classes in Charlotte. I went to a stupid acting class in Charlotte.
No kidding.
Because you're standing up in front of people, and you're all of a sudden you're sweating, you're nervous, and you can't So when you got to get up and act goofy in front of people and whatnot, it breaks a lot of that, and it gave me a lot more confidence talking to my own group of guys. And the one thing I know for sure is if your leader's not confident, the team's not going to be confident. So sometimes I was scared shitless, as they say, excuse me, but I could not show that. That's why up on the box, if you look at me, very, very rarely did you see me. I think there's a couple of shots of me sometimes jumping up and pumping or smile, but very rarely did I show emotion on the box, because that way my competitors couldn't tell if I was happy or sad, and my guys just always knew that, like, if he's not panicking, we're not going to panic, and I think it was really important that confidence trickles down through the team. If I was up there scared, they'd have been scared to go over the wall.
Are you a good poker player?
I'm not, because I don't like to gamble. I don't gamble, and I've been to Vegas a gazillion times, and I love Vegas. I love to go to the shows. I love to see the people or whatever. But I always tell everybody, if I'm going to gamble, it's going to be on whether we're going to make it on fuel or tires. I don't want to use up any luck that I might need to win a race.
Yeah, right on. I'm going to be jumping around on a bunch of different things, from technical stuff to life and whatnot. But Chad Canals basically just called and said, "Can I speak to Ray Evernham?" and cold called you and said, "I want to work for you."
Yeah.
And then you said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And here's the part of the story that I get mixed up on. Did he say, "I want your job," or did he just say, "I want to be a crew chief"?
Well, he said, "I want your job," and I think he meant he wanted to be a crew chief. But I can tell you, there aren't many people in the world like Chad. There are a lot of people that say they are, but I will tell you that from the time that I met him to the way he is today, he has that one focus, again, about being the best. And that guy's he's put in the effort, and he's made the sacrifices to do it. That has been his priority. And he's never wavered, and I've never seen him waver or weaken or whatever from that. And that type of commitment, and to be paired with a driver who had that type of commitment the same way, like, I don't know. You never say never, right? But I'm gonna tell you what, it'll be a long time before there's another paired driver crew chief combination that's that committed. And then ultimately they ran their course, and that commitment probably became the end of them. Sometimes your best qualities end up becoming your worst qualities, but they totally broke every possible record on the run in between, and it was purely because those guys literally made the goal to win every week, the goal to win the championships. They gave 100% to be the best that they could, and I don't know how they carried that kind of commitment under that kind of pressure for that long.
At what point from him making that cold call did you, I guess, believe him? Like, was there a pivotal moment when because he worked for you for a few years? He
worked for me from, I guess it was 93 on up to 97. Then he went over to, because he was with us through the first two championships. Honestly, you never know if somebody's going to make it or not. But, Chad was he was a pain in the ass. He was just, because he would just wear you out. Like, he was just like, he couldn't, he'd get his work done and want to do something else, and he got involved in this and that, and then he literally, I knew he was gonna, you wonder, does somebody have the talent to make it? Are they gonna get in the right position to make it? But there was never any doubt that he had the drive to make it. He just was, even without the experience, he was ready to jump to the next level. And as we went on, he finally the only reason that he left is because we didn't have an opening for him. He had grown, like he'd outgrown all the positions in our team. And, you know, there was myself, Ed Guzzo, Brian Weitzel. You know, we weren't really going anywhere. And then there was Chad, and so he had to go somewhere else to learn. And he's done that, you know, again, over and over. As I said, I look at him and think, man, I admire. I just admire that commitment that he has made, and it is becoming the best crew chief on the planet was his number one priority, and he sacrificed many other things in his life to do that.
Was there a pivotal moment from? I think most of us are familiar with the stories of the early days of when you first met Jeff Gordon. Was there a moment when you knew that, or had confidence or faith that he would become one of the best Cup drivers ever?
Well,
I mean, I'm assuming you didn't know that like from the very beginning, the first few months of knowing him, or?
I knew that the first day we worked together.
Really?
Because I had all of that experience with those other drivers and, you know, going through IROC and whatnot. And the first day that I worked with him, he was 18 years old. And the way he spoke about the car, the feedback that he gave me, what he felt in the car, in our first conversation, I was like, this kid is special. And, you know, because I'd heard about him, I'd watched him run the ESPN Thunders, like, you know, it's like everybody knew he was good. But are you good because you have a fast car? Are you good just because you're a brave driver in an open wheel car? Or are you just good because everybody else is bad? I don't know. But that day, we went to Charlotte, and he'd never driven Charlotte Motor Speedway, and I think he'd only driven we had a Buck Baker school car, right? We're at Charlotte Motor Speedway, you know, testing this thing. And the feedback that he gave me the first time that I worked with him, I was like, okay, this kid is special. Now, do you know that he's going to go on to be one of the greatest? You know, as I watched him progress, you know, I knew he was going to be good. And then when we got to work together on the Baby Ruth car, I knew that if he could get in the right position, he could go to the top of the sport. And I'll tell you that again. I tell people this all the time. You know, there's just certain people that you work with that you know why they are. Mario Andretti. Spend 30 minutes with Mario and you'll understand why he's Mario Andretti. Alan Jr., one of the greatest race car drivers I've ever worked with. Right? Jeff Gordon, you know, it's just, it doesn't take you long to figure it out because, again, they're at a much different level. And Jeff made it so easy for me to fix a car because he, above anybody I've ever worked with, Jeff can not tell you what to do to fix it, but he can pinpoint exactly what he feels and understand that in time. Something he was really good at was telling me where the weight was on each tire at which part of the corner and when it got there and when it left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He could sit there and go just like this. Close his eyes and play you back a lap as if you had a computer plugged in.
Wow. And your partner secured the rights to IROC. The current plan, and tell me if there's any update to it, is you hope to run some sort of version of that series, but the next more immediate thing is to do a reunion.
Correct. Rob Kaufman, who's he's a vintage racer and, you know, real car guy. Rob's been a good racer. He's run Le Mans and everything like that. We had to be friends, and he knew, that I loved the IROC series, and that was my history. And we had tried to get that name once before, and he knew some people. And he said, well, let's try and get it. You know, like it'd be really cool just to have it, just to do some vintage stuff with. So that was our plan. We were able to get the marks back, and our plan is to put together a reunion. So far, I found about 35 legitimate IROC race cars that are out, and I know there's more out there. Some of them are in the UK, you know, a lot of them here in America. Talked to many of the drivers already, you know, former crew members. So we want to have an IROC an IROC reunion, and we would like to partner with some of these vintage events and hopefully get these cars back on track. And we may end up having to do some replicas or different versions of them. The Firebirds are all pretty new, pretty safe, but we want to have an exhibition, get together reunion, but hopefully put something together where we're doing some version of getting the IROC series going again.
And who owned it before?
Well, Roger Penske, Jay Signori, Les Richter, and Mike Phelps. And then when IROC kind of got out in 2008, 9, and things drafted up, about 2017, 18, I think they let it slip. And then one of these companies that just kind of grabbed it, and we were able to do some negotiations to get it back.
And is the plan still, so that's the reunion, which is kind of its own thing, but then are you still planning on building a modern-ish chassis with a vintage body for something more regular?
I would like to do that, but the business plan's got to make sense. We learned a lot of lessons on the SRX thing, and I think that everybody's got a lane, right? NASCAR's got a lane, and IndyCar and IMSA, and we need to make sure that we fit in, that we get in that lane and it works with other motorsports, and that it makes business sense. And I think there is a room for a form of motorsports entertainment. I said that as I designed the SRX series, and that kind of changed. So if you said to me, Ray, if you had a gazillion dollars, what would you do? Well, then we'd design this really wild car and take IROC around the world. Make it the true international race of champions. But what I'd really like to do is to bring back, to do some form of the old IROC that people really liked, that worked closely with IndyCar, NASCAR, IMSA, Formula One.
And so would that be your motivation for, well, I find it interesting, and I find it perfect. So this question is not trying to insinuate that you should be making it a modern body, but at the time, IROC was using new bodies, and to bring it back, you're using the old body. So what was the motivation for with your intent of using a vintage body compared to, let's say if you took like a Trans Am looking car today, or if you took a modern bodied car for IROC? What's your motivation for using the vintage bodies?
It really depends on the demographic, and as I said, the business plan. A lot of people we've got a couple of the old IROCs sitting around here, and we've scanned them. But I thought, well, geez, what about a cool little vintage? If we're doing a vintage deal, a Pro-Am, kind of where the pros start, and the other guys get in using the vintage. I like what I call the Gen 2 Camaro, which is not Gen by Chevrolet, it's IROC generation, the 77 to 80 cars are really cool, right? So, you look at something like that, you could easily put that body over, a safe, up-to-date, inexpensive chassis. And, then if you look at the different stages of what that IROC could be, maybe there's IROC replica Porsches, maybe there's IROC replica older Camaros, and then maybe there is that new design IROC that's a combination of an Indy car and a stock car. Out for the future. So could be stages. I think it's important that we look at what the people in the gaming world would be interested in, because I think that's a big part of any sport that you do now, whether that's golf or simulators. And so, and to have, why does it have to be one type of IROC car? Why couldn't it be, hey, this is this IROC series, this is this IROC series, and they're at different levels. And IROC, just that IROC brand just stands for the more of a uniform type racing entertainment.
That's interesting. Okay, so because I feel like some of the I'm very fascinated with the business end. So Alex and I actually run a marketing agency outside of the work that we're doing, like here, for instance. So I'm always interested in the business and marketing side of things as well. I think there's some forms of racing, some of the best forms of racing are also the ones that are not as popular as I think some of the more pure or entertaining pieces of motorsports are not the ones that are getting the most money, getting the most sponsorship, getting the most attention. So I think that's an interesting dilemma that you have. So, I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about, is you have to find what is going to resonate with people. If not, the money's not going to follow, so to speak.
Right. And, you know, people like stars, they like celebrities, but, you know, I think that those can be created because of the series, right? And as I said, I think it's important that whatever we do, people can play, so that you can drive it, you can race it, you can see it. So it has to be virtual and it has to be real, and that's a much bigger business plan. But I goal honestly would be, I feel it has to be a global thing to be it, you know, big enough, or it's always just going to be a fun thing that we're doing. It's always going to be fun, right? You know, for doing some IROC stuff. But ultimately, to get people interested, I think the IROC name has still enough global exposure. People know what it is. So if we could come up with that combination of how we can do virtual and reality and make it work, you know, I just think there's something there. But again, that's going to take bigger pockets than mine and probably more brain power. I'm the car guy.
Yeah. Like you said, a lot of people know what the name is, but I think from a marketing perspective, it's really powerful because it's an easy name to understand. I was talking to someone yesterday about IROC, and he immediately said International Race of Champions. But I'm thinking of all these other initials that people don't always know what they stand for. So I think it's very quickly, like, once you say the name, I understand what this is, and I'm turned on by it. So even if I'm not familiar with what IROC is, I think you can convince fans to care about it. But to play on marketing and outside of IROC, in your experience, what brand sponsorships, the business deals, the money end of it, what did brands do with teams or with NASCAR to be successful, to stick around?
You know, win, right? That's because the more the more you win, the bigger the TV rating, the more TV time, right? That drives up the value of your product. But they also, I think that the best teams, the best sponsors, also really understood how to measure the success that they were getting from NASCAR, and what correlates sales, and knew how to use it, because not every sponsor has and does things the same way. They don't want the same. Some people want impressions, some people want sales, some people want business to business. So, we always try to really get together and understand exactly what the sponsor wanted and what did the sponsor see as return for their money. What were they trying to grow? Because it is different. So I think it's as much on the team that's getting the sponsorship, or the people that are asking for the sponsorship, to deliver that to the sponsor rather than the sponsor trying to figure it out. But if you look at, obviously automotive sponsors are in for a reason, but there's been also a lot of long-term people involved in NASCAR, IndyCar sponsorship, and they're using it, again, they're using it for hospitality, they're using it for business to businesses, and that, you've got to know what the end game is. If you're just going to slap your name on the side of a car, and that's normally doesn't work for everybody. Those sponsors don't last long. It's really knowing the end game and being able to measure the value.
Yes, I think that's really important. I've heard a statistic a while back: for every $1 that a sponsorship spends with a race team, the successful ones are spending $3 to $4 on advertising that relationship.
I don't know. I don't know those numbers. I always had a formula for our guys, is to say, look, for every $1 in sponsorship they're giving us, I want to make sure we're sending $2 back.
To jump to a technical question, when you are setting up IROC cars, how do you set up a bunch of different cars to be identical?
Well, when we were doing the IROC cars, they were all built identical, so it was easy, right? Like they were all the front ends were the same, chassis heights, bodies, all that. So it's easy to set up cars if they're built correctly. So we had jigs and fixtures for things like spindles and A-frames and, making sure that all of the, just holes in the center links were drilled in the right place. And so if the cars were built identical and you said, okay, look, here's this car, we're going to have this camber, this caster, these wheel weights, they came out pretty close. And, most of the time, you got to figure, I did that back in the 80s, and the hardest thing for us was matching them aerodynamically. Two biggest problems you have, aerodynamic body differences, because little differences can, obviously make a big speed difference. And at that time, carburetors, we were, the carburetor bodies, we would have to run on a flow bench, and you get 100 carburetors out of a box and keep the 25 best ones and send the other ones back. So, but I feel like we did a pretty darn good job, because with those cars, for what we had and the tools back then, I think they can even do a better job today. We were fortunate. We had switched over to the Goodyear radial tire before a lot of people did. IROC developed a lot of that, and that helped us a lot. They were much more consistent than the old bias ply, and we did the Penske shock absorbers there, so they were much more consistent than the old oil-based type shocks. So we had a couple of really good things in our pocket, and then Jay's experience and our guys. I said we had jigs and fixtures and height sticks and we had those cars pretty close for a bunch of kids from the short track.
Yeah. You mentioned in your podcast with Junior that cleanliness from a team can be a way to manipulate the competition. And that triggered, then I started thinking of, I used to run mini stock at Bowman Gray, and Tim Brown always had the nicest, cleanest car. And I just always thought that was a way of, well, you're so fast that now you have time to wax the car. But I never considered it as a way to mess with the heads of the competition.
Well, it does. I don't think you intentionally do that, but you find out that that's a byproduct. Like for me, clean, neat, and organized, it puts pride in the team. Again, I learned that early working at a gas station with my dad and his friend Jack Stoddard, but certainly on through the Penske organization and Hendrick. Look, this is the way we do things. It's neat, it's clean, it's organized. It's like you're in the service, you make your bed, right? That's a mental thing, to know that you're prepared. I don't like a dirty shop. Don't like stuff disorganized. Within reason, if you've got the manpower to do it, you do it. But you do realize that also, as it goes on, you realize that it also sets a precedent for the competition, because just like you said, they're looking at wow, they got their stuff together. So while we're just barely getting the tires on this thing, getting it to the racetrack, they've got their truck clean, they've got their toolbox organized, they're on time, the guys are dressed, and it just sets a mindset. Sometimes people come in thinking they're second. We used to take the 24 and practice getting it out of the truck, getting it through inspection. We wanted to be first off the truck, first through inspection, first setting up the pit road, all those things. And, Chad will be the same way, because Chad will tell you, hey, that was what they've learned, because, it almost demoralizes the competition if they can't even beat you getting the car out of the truck.
So you would literally practice that at the shop?
Everything. We practiced everything, from practice changes, like if we come in changing a spring, a shock, a sway bar to save time. We wanted to, if our car came in and somebody came in next to us, we were both going to change a sway bar, we wanted to be done and gone by the time they got theirs apart. It just was one of those things. It was all about doing it faster and doing it better.
So I was curious were there any other ways of manipulating the competition that you can think of that were either a byproduct or more conscious?
We used to screw around with people, be on the radio and stuff like that, because everyone would scan us. And if we did something different on our car, they would, everybody be talking about it. And sometimes we would do stupid stuff. Like, I think we were racing somewhere on Halloween, and because the 24 car had a it was orange, like in the front. So, and we put teeth on it and made it look like a pumpkin, and somebody on the radio was like, 24 car must have found something in the wind tunnel. Look at the way they've got that thing taped up. And then you saw a couple of the other Chevys trying it, and we're like, we're killed. So, I think everybody just kind of screw with everybody. Or, you'd say on the radio, give me that 5,000-pound spring, and people would be looking like, oh, my God, what are they doing there? When you are in a fortunate situation where you're setting that pace and people stuff happens like unbelievable. And I talk about this, I think, in the book, but we're leading Rockingham, right? We're leading Rockingham. We only run 2 laps or 3 laps. Caution comes out. Jeff's going on the caution. He goes, shit, I got a flat. We're like, oh, we got a pit. Comes down pit road all by himself. We put 4 tires on it, and we had flat right here. And I'm thinking, man, we got to start in the back all the way. And I look up, the next lap, the whole field is coming down pit road to put on tires, because we stopped and put on tires after only 3 or 4 laps. They thought, oh, we knew something, and it put us right back in the lead. And I was like, it was the most unbelievable thing I ever saw. I'm thinking, wow, we were about to start tail at 30th or 40th or whatever, and everybody just pitted because we pitted.
And so does that go back to kind of you were looking at other avenues for inspiration, for advice, for how to be the best? And I think you were saying that so many in NASCAR at the time were just following the leader, quite literally. And so you were looking at other avenues of other places of inspiration to be the best that you could in different facets.
Well, and I think the timing was time for change. NASCAR, a lot of those cars were built bulletproof. It was about, not breaking down, and the technology and tools, the CNC machines and all that stuff were just breaking in then, like some of the new science, and it was just coming in. And there were some great racers there that just weren't ready to change. They had all the success, right? They'd had the success. So we didn't have anything to lose other than change some things. And we were fortunate that Hendrick was open. Like Rick could have said, hey, look, you guys, you're not building modifieds. These ain't late models or sprint cars. You need to build them like we want to build them. And he gave us the leeway to do a lot of stuff that I don't think other owners would have let us do, and it was working. And then the rest of Hendrick got behind it, and Rick really, really invested in his engineering staff and his tools, and that just got us further ahead. Where other people, again, they were reluctant to change. I mean, how do you tell a guy like Dale Earnhardt and Richard Childress that they got to change because it's not working? You know what I mean? And eventually it happens to everybody, right? The guys that are winning are the last ones that want to change, and the guys that aren't, and at that time, we were just, that timing was really good for us, that those changes were starting to work. The radial tire was coming in, aerodynamics were getting more important, shock absorbers, and there were materials available for engines for turning more RPM and running hotter, and we weren't afraid to go out on the edge.
Right on. One more question, and then I wanted to fire off because some kind of quick fire questions, but so modified cars are not exclusive to the South, but I've kind of referred to them as if the South had an F1, that would be the modified car. Like, it's a better horsepower to weight ratio. It's kind of the max you can get from a grassroots perspective. But tell me, from your perspective, what is a modified car? And I assume you love modified racing, right?
Yeah, you end up just by the number of them sitting around. Modifieds are where I grew up. That was my love. I still think they're the sexiest car on the planet, even above Formula One cars. That's why we built the Ghost. The Ghost. Look at the Ghost modified that won Pikes Peak. And so modifieds aren't in the South. So modifieds were predominantly north, and then they had south. So there was like some kind of Mason-Dixon line, north-south thing. You know, I think we were still kind of fighting the Civil War, but it's really cool because the modifieds from the South would come north and have their great stars, you know, the Ray Hendricks and Sonny Hutchins, and they'd race against, you know, Richie and Evans and all those guys, and the same would be so.
And I remember the northern guys coming down here and running,
It's the oldest division in NASCAR, period. You know, and to me, they really are. And they evolved from the moonshine, from the bootleg cars. That's where they started, right? They couldn't run strictly stock because the bootleg guys wanted to race, and all their cars were modified, so they called them modifieds. But then they evolved into, you know, really open wheel cars, tubular chassis, big motors. You know, for a while, there was no weight restriction. We ran fuel injection. The first modified I ever drove, 494 cubic inches, fuel injected, and a Vega body, like, whoo, you know. And so, you know, they to me, it's they're very low, they're very wide, they're very fast. They're a different animal, high left side weight, different. They're not afraid to bang and move around. They're incredibly fast. They have to restrict them down just about everywhere they run them now. But there's some of the most exciting short track racing, I think, that you can see. And it's just that, you know, that's where I grew up. When I grew up in New Jersey, it was watching the modifieds. When they used to have the old coupes and sedans, you can see I've got some of the cars that I saw race in the 60s. I've got some of the cars that I raced against. And, you know, it was one of Richie Evans' cars and Jeff Bodine car. And so that's really, if you said, if you could go back and run one more competitive season in some race, where would it be? I'd like to go back and run. I'd like to go back and run in the mid '80s in a modified again.
Why didn't it become as popular as like Cup? Because they ran them sometimes on big tracks.
Oh, they ran
right?
Daytona, Talladega. You know, they have, you know, it's like anything else. You know, the Cup's where the stars are at, right? And Cup's, you know, that Cup's where the Daytonas and the, you know, that's where the legends are. The Richard Pettys and the, you know, the Earnhardts and the Yarboroughs and, you know, the Allisons ran the modifieds, but, you know, I think that it would be hard for the manufacturers to pump a lot of money into modifieds because they don't really look like their cars. And we can never forget how important that the manufacturers' support has been to NASCAR's growth, because the battle between the manufacturers has always been, I think, as big as the battle between the, you know, the Pettys and the Pearsons. And, you know, you have those stars, but, you know, you know, and I think that maybe that's a little bit of what NASCAR may be lacking now. You know, we need to maybe get some of those manufacturers' battles. You know, things are maybe a little bit too homologated, too close together. You know, when the Ford people booed the Chevy guys, and, you know, we had Oldsmobile and we had Buick, and, you know, and we even have Mercury and, you know, different manufacturers. So hopefully more of the foreign manufacturers will come get involved. You know, we need those rivalries back. We got some great young stars, but we need to get them mad at one another once in a while, and racing, right, and get that back in it.
Well, let me jump into some of these kind of quick questions. Don't give them too much thought, but like, for instance, what do you think of the Honda rumors? And is that a rumor? That's not necessarily a new rumor. Isn't this kind of something you hear every couple years? Yeah. Rumors of a new OEM jumping in. Yeah,
you know, and I think it's because that they're looking, and I think there's right now it's a good time for a new OEM to come in, especially if they're looking at doing a homologated engine, which I'm not for all of those things. I do think that this new car is making it a good time for new owners, new people to come in. I just wish they'd give them a bigger toolbox to adjust it. I'm okay with having cars be the same if you can make more adjustments to it.
Speaking of that, now you had a lot of involvement in the car of tomorrow. Did you have much involvement in the latest chassis?
I have not. You know, we did have some input in the car of tomorrow, but I've not had any input in this car.
What are your feelings of now? And correct me, I don't know if this is official, or I've read some quotes about it, about the new car could potentially be set up for the ability to add hybrid or EV to it. What are your feelings of something like that?
Well, I think it's inevitable, right? And if we want the manufacturers to stay involved, then we have to be able to give them an opportunity to showcase what they're selling. There's no reason to do it, right? If it's still win on Sunday, sell on Monday, we can't be winning with what they can't sell. So I think that, look, if that's the direction that the manufacturers are going in other forms of racing, then, at some point we have to be happy that we're racing, not what we're racing with, right? Because I just believe that without manufacturer support, I don't think either IndyCar or NASCAR could be as strong, certainly not Formula One.
What are your personal feelings on EV, like for hot rods or street stuff?
This is one of those ones where, again, I've got my professional feelings and my personal feelings. I'm a good bit deaf because I like loud exhaust and open pipes. I like spinning wheels and shifting around, but that's just me. So my personal feeling is I'll drive one of my hot rods or I'll drive a modified with open pipes. I'm not saying I'm not going to go watch or be interested in I was so interested in the Garage 56 project, what they did with that. And, you look at maybe that they start to go in a hybrid direction with something like that. But that is the evolution that I'm talking. If we never move off of where I am, they're never going to get to where the kids that are in school now are going to like it. So I think it's important that we look at where we're going without alienating. And I'm happy with my time. I can come in here and, or I can run up to VIR and take my old IROC car from the 80s and drive it around. I've had my time and my turn. But if you're asking me my personal preference, I'll drive big noise with fuel pouring out the exhaust.
Yeah, and I've heard that argument of there was the argument that cars would replace horses and people that love horses, but you can still own a horse and still ride horses, even though cars dominate transportation. So you can still enjoy hopefully they don't, not to get into the conspiracy or politics of it, hopefully they don't squash it so that we can't own gas engines ever.
We won't be running around like Mad Max. That'd be a whole nother movie.
Well, yeah. What do you think about Tony Stewart entering NHRA?
Love the guy. Love Tony, and I think Tony and I have had this conversation, and Tony gives it that all shucks. But there's a group of drivers in the world, right? And some people put that group different, but you look at Andretti, Foyt, everything successful, right? So Andretti, Foyt, I always say Unser, I throw Dan Gurney in there for a different reason, but there's that group of, when people look, like these guys, look, that legit drivers, drive anything in the world. The only guy that's ever done the IndyCar win, stock car win, and had a fuel. I think he won the sprint car, he won the modified, and he made finals in the fuel. John Andretti. John Andretti did it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so John did it.
I didn't know that.
And not a lot of people do. John was a pretty accomplished driver, and so John. If you look at John's record, he did that. Tony has an opportunity to have been USAC champion, IndyCar champion. He's done sprints. He's done midgets, World of Outlaws, NASCAR champion, right? He has a legit shot before he's ready to retire of being the top fuel champion. If he were to be NASCAR champion, IndyCar champion, I said USAC champion, top fuel champion, that to me makes him he's on that Mount Rushmore of greatest racing drivers. Not just stock car driving. Like, think about that. You look at again, some of these guys, and forgive me, because I just was at the Motorsports Hall of Fame, and I get them all this mixed up stuff, but he was a world champion motorcycle racer, and they're going to be mad at me for not being able to, this is old age, but world champion motorcycle racer, won the Isle of Man twice, and then wins the F1 World Championship. Right? You're like, not many people like that in the world. Like, that's impressive, right? Surviving the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
Right? So, but John Surtees.
Okay.
And to me, to watch Tony do that as a friend and somebody who admires him, I mean, I'm cheering for him. But he's one of those guys that's just not afraid to go all in and put himself out there to prove he can do it.
Who else would you consider your Mount Rushmore or top 5 drivers of all time?
To me, Mario Andretti is the world's greatest driver for a lot of reasons. Because of what he's done, he is spending time with Mario is like spending time with the Pope. He's royalty, and AJ Foyt, and Tony. When I look at the all around, and I know people are going, oh, well, what about Michael Schumacher? Yeah, I get it. What about Jeff Gordon? What about Jimmy Johnson? What about, but when I look at these guys, I'm always going to put Jeff Gordon up there because he's like my little brother. So he gets a free pass wherever, and people are going to go, well, that's just Ray loves Jeff, but yeah, Jeff was pretty damn good too. And Jeff could have done IndyCar or Formula One with no problem. He's one of the people I would look in the eye and guarantee that whichever he chose to do, he was going to be successful. And there's probably several guys out there like that. But growing up in the America in the racing world that I grew up in it, when I look at loving the sprints, the modifieds, the midgets, and stock cars and all that, and seeing what Mario Andretti did and how he's handled himself, and then obviously with AJ Foyt, again, certainly what he did. I put those 2 guys right there, and I put Tony right with him, and then it gets pretty level after that, because you look at the answers, and as I said, a guy like Gurney, and these guys that have done so much in so many different cars, when a lot of those guys, unfortunately, were gone before the 70s, right? They either retired or they died, right? So to have Mario and AJ still to look back and say, winning Le Mans and winning Indy and winning Daytona, winning Formula One championship, winning Indy, winning Daytona, then leaving Monaco or wherever they race Formula One cars and flying back to run a 100-mile race at DeCoin in a champ car. People just don't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Do you have again, just jumping into some of these rapid fire ones, do you have a favorite item in your collection that's not a car?
I have one of George Fulmer's helmets. And George was really special to me because I think George is probably one of the greatest American race drivers that a lot of people don't put up there, road racer. George never really raced professionally until he was 29 years old. He was several-time, an SCCA champion, but then also Trans Am champion, Can-Am champion, IndyCar winner, NASCAR stock car winner, and podiumed in Formula One. So George's pretty special, and he taught me a lot when I was at IROC. Got to spend a lot of time with him. And, there's some fun things that I have. I have a $5 bill that I won off Earnhardt, a bet. And it's kind of funny because I bet him $5, and he lost the bet. And the next day I saw him at the driver's meeting. I said, "You owe me $5." And he said, "For what?" I said, because I said, because Little Al, it was whether who was going to beat who to the start-finish line, Little Al or Bodine. And so he didn't have $5, so he had to borrow it off of Harry Hyde. So Harry Hyde gave him $5, and I said, "Sign that." So I've still got that. And
that's really cool.
I've got a piece of the 43 car that Jeff and I went. It just seemed like if Jeff was going to have a bad day and wreck somebody, for some reason it was Richard Petty's car. And Richard Petty got tired of us wrecking him, and we wrecked him on pit road at Atlanta one time. Then they cut a piece of it off, and he came over and he says, "If he wants this so bad, he might as well have it." So I just looked at him and I said, "Would you sign it?" And so he signed it. I was kidding him about that, but just fun things like that in the collection. But those are the things that come to mind pretty quick.
Do you who would be a person who would be the most responsible for tearing up cars that you have worked on or built, or an Evernham car?
Whew, man. Well, an Evernham car or an SRX car? It's like my good friend Paul Tree. But I love him. I love PT, but he tore up he tore up a lot of cars, and we still get along good. And I'd still have him drive tomorrow because I love the guy. But I would say between my wife Erin and Casey Kane, they both were fast, but they tore up some of my stuff. My wife got she gets the vote because she tore up some of my sprint cars and some of my stock cars.
All right. Do you have a car in the collection? I would refer to it as like a Moby Dick. Like, do you have a car that you wish you could add to the collection, or a car that you've tried to acquire, or maybe doesn't exist, or you haven't been able to find?
The truth is, there's lots of cars I'd like to have. There's lots of cars I'd like to have, but the one car that I've wanted my whole life, and unfortunately it's not here right now, it's in the Savoy Museum, but is the car from American Graffiti. I wanted that car since I was 15 years old, never in a million years.
Cool.
You dream of having it, but you're dreaming, right? And so to have that car right now is really special for me because it's like in the book, we start the book and come around full circle on what Pikes Peak meant to me, like, because Pikes Peak was a lot more than a race to me. So to have the American Graffiti car here, I see my whole life as a 15-year-old on up to today when I look at that car, and I'm really fortunate to have it.
The Hendrick team helped build some of the cars for the original Days of Thunder movie?
Well, yeah, they did a lot of that work, yeah.
Are you guys involved, or is there any scuttlebutt about the sequel?
No, I don't do a lot with Hendrick, other than being friends with Mr. Hendrick and with Jeff Gordon. I don't really have any official stuff there. Okay. I'm honestly, I'm a cheerleader there because when you do something with them, I mean, other than just some PR stuff and everything, which is fine. I love doing that, but to go over there and be part of the team, which I did in 2015, 2016 area, you're in. You got to be in 100%. It can't be a part-time deal.
Yeah.
And in where I'm at in my life right now with family and things, that going on, I don't really feel like I can look Mr. Hendrick in the eye and make that commitment. So I'd rather just be buddies than jump, because I know that in their world, like we talked about Chad, if you're not 100% in, you're not helping them.
Yeah. Is the Ghost the perfect race car?
It is for me. I mean, we look at it, that car, I love that car. It's a car that evolved through my dreams of years. I love the old sedans. We built it the old-fashioned way. It's quick as hell. I mean, it scares people with Trans Am cars and GT cars. We took it to Pikes Peak and got a class win up there, and against some pretty stiff competition. I ran a really respectable time. The car has always been a happy car. I think it was probably all of my best chassis thoughts and ideas for load path and design and handling and whatnot are in that car. What I had at that time. I think I have some other stuff now that I could do, but it's the last full chassis that we've built. I'd like to maybe build another one someday, but that car, if instead of looking at it like a race car, just like I look at the American Graffiti cars, my life in a circle. Like if you look at that car, you can think, that's everything I've learned in a circle.
Wow, right on. Where did the nickname Hollywood come from?
Oh gosh, I used to wear sunglasses and I let my hair grow out on the beach, and Charlie Roberts out at Wall Stadium, the announcer, started calling me Hollywood, and can't say that was my favorite nickname. We tried to promote it for a while, but we just, I think when I had one helmet with it on. When I got rid of that helmet, we kind of dropped the name, but I don't know. I think, back then everybody wants to be a big star, so I was probably playing up the Tim Richmond thing.
Yeah. Do you think there's if you had to pick one, what's the best sounding engine ever made? It's
got to be, again, you're talking for for me, the best sounding. See, there's engines. Boy, this is going to be a tough one, okay? Because let me frame it like this. Probably my favorite engine sound is that SB2.
I had a feeling
that fuel injected that fuel injected SB2
with the big stacks.
Bark.
Yeah.
I mean, it scares people, right? But in some of the vintage events and the things that I've been around, listening to some of those 91730s and stuff like that, not having grown up around that, it's pretty amazing. So I know I'm probably gonna get yelled at by my purist modified guys, but I'm gonna tell you those twin turbo Porsches just pow 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 powing at Daytona when they're going by.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. Yeah.
What are just a couple more, and then finish up with the book. But so this is a bigger question, but what are some of your favorite, whether you had your hands involved in them, saw them, or even just read about them later, of having that competitive advantage? Things that borderlined, what was the recent one of the glove out the window?
Oh, yeah. I think that, but I think you look at some of the things that guys did. There was a gentleman we just lost, Richard Jackson, or Leo Jackson, who brilliant machinist, Harry Gant, and
Right.
Those guys were really, really, really just, they're mountain men, but they were super mechanically smart. And he and Andy Petrie in that group came up with a cambered rear end with Harry Gant, right? And people, just weren't thinking about stuff like that. And I think that was one of the most ingenious things. I think a lot of the stuff that we did with Hendrick, the T-Rex cars, certainly it's an urban legend bigger than the true story right now, but there were a lot of good things that we did back then when we were looking at basic race car stuff, reducing unsprung weight and working on underbody aerodynamics and geometry and all those things. So I'm proud of a lot of that stuff at Hendrick. But I think one of the things that I've helped kick off at Hendrick was the carbon fiber seat development, and then Rick took that on with Gary DeHart after I left. So some of the safety developments that came out of that were I'm proud of. But the carbon monoxide scrubber that we put in Jeff's car, I think that helped a lot of drivers eventually. When you look at some of the safety things that we did with leg supports and shoulder supports and things we did in Jeff cars, others people adapted that. So I am proud of that. But we there were again things that we came up with that we just weren't afraid to do, and people. I remember one that used to be, hey, if you carried 150, 175 pounds of lead in your car, you were doing good, And they took our car all apart. At Michigan one time because they thought we were cheating, and they took out every stick of lead. And when the people in the garage saw that there was over 400 pounds of lead laying out on the floor, they started building cars in a different way.
Yeah. Wow. What do people get the most wrong about Ray Evernham?
Gosh, I don't know. I think sometimes people do think Ray Evernham is the character crew chief that he was in the 90s. As I said, not that person anymore. Or they think I'm so smart I can fix anything, or that like I'm super organized or whatever. I try to be all those things, but that doesn't mean I'm perfect. And I think again, people, as you evolve, people lock you into this one part of your life where you're this character. And when I was a race driver and the IROC crew member, I was this guy. And when I was the number 24 crew chief, I was this guy. When I was the Dodge team owner, I was this guy. When I was doing TV, I was this guy, right? Now I'm a combination of all those guys. So it's It's I think people expect me to be whichever one they were watching 100%. I think people expect me to be mean and grouchy because there were 2 or 3 of those sections I spent a pretty good time being mean and grouchy. And you try to explain to people, look, I didn't want to do that intentionally, but when you come up and talk to me at the racetrack, if I'm spending time talking to you, I'm not thinking about how to make that race car go faster. And sometimes people would take that the wrong way. That's why I hate going to the racetrack now when I don't have anything to do. Because if I'm at the racetrack and I'm not working, I can't talk to you. You're working. I get it. So I was probably not a nice person to people at the racetrack.
Yeah, understandably so. What do you want people to take away from the book? Or another framing of that question would be, there are fans like my dad who know all the players. He knows who Richie Evans is. He understands and wants to learn more about your perspective and read the book. But what about the average car guy? Like, what's the biggest takeaway that you think people would have?
Well, as I said, in writing the book, you want people to be, first of all, you want them to be entertained, right? Because that's what, if you're going to read, you want to be entertained, or you want to be educated. It's the only 2 reasons.
Sure. You absorb any content, almost, yeah.
And if you can do both, I think that's really good. So I hope that people read the book and they can hear the voice, understand the passion, and be entertained with some of the things, but also be educated about. I can't stress the fact of you've got to be willing to evolve and rethink stuff and change along the way. And if you can do that, it doesn't really matter whether you've got a ton of trophies or that. And we talk about in the book, there's sometimes in learning there's no difference between a trophy or a scar. They're both going to teach you a lesson. And then those lessons are going to be valuable. And if you use those lessons and put those lessons to work for you, you're gonna end up with more trophies because it's going to be personal satisfaction and growth. And to me, that understanding how to be better every day, so that at least if I'm not better to make a car go faster, at least I'm a better person. I'm a better father, a better communicator, a better husband, a better And then, hey, maybe some days I'm worried about if I'm going to be a better driver, beat my lap times, but I think that part of it, and try and take a minute to reflect and enjoy. So I hope that they are entertained and educated by the book.
Right on. Are you guys opening a new location?
We have, there's one in Raleigh and one in Greensboro. The original one is here in Davidson, North Carolina. We'd love to open more, but funding has gotten hard. So right now we're working, just trying to keep all 3 of them going. And it's for adults on the autism spectrum, because you can't really get a lot of help for the adults once they graduate high school. The good news is there's a lot more awareness. We can, people like you and I, we can create a lot more awareness to get people focused on it, and hopefully get some of the government involved to be sending funding out here and there, because there's a ton of great things now that can help children on autism and adults on the spectrum. So, but we do a car show once a year to raise money for the Ignite chapters, and try and fund the rest of it with myself and some of the friends that I have. But, money's getting tight, so we've got to keep that awareness up.
When's the show?
The show is always the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, and we get it's called Americana Live. We get some incredible cars. We had almost 700 cars this year that were just and it's a celebration of the automobile, because you can see anything there from, just a mom and pop Volvo with some cool wheels on it to blowout customs. It's really well supported, and it just shows how much faith, how great and charitable the car community is.
And then is Ray J does he have a YouTube channel? Is he doing movie reviews?
He does Facebook, and it's called Ray J's Reviews, and Ray J's loves movies, and he does a great job writing reviews about all the new movies and what he suggests and what he picks. He's got a decent following, and he's really good. If he tells your movie's pretty good and why it's normally pretty good, and if he says it's not going to be good, well, he's pretty honest. I call him. He's probably a little bit too young to remember Siskel and Ebert, but sometimes he reminds me of those two guys. He can be pretty honest.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite car movie?
It's got to be American Graffiti. Still definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We've gone over the time, and I want to talk to you for the rest of the day. But I appreciate all your time, and I'm really excited about the new book. And thank you.
All right. Thank you.